April 30, 1945. Near Leipzig, Germany, cold morning air hangs over a crowded holding yard where German women stand in silence, waiting to learn their fate. They expect anger, punishment, even revenge. Instead, American soldiers walk in with blankets, food cans, and medical kits. A sight that feels impossible after years of terrifying propaganda. But then in one shocking moment, a soldier suddenly grabs a German woman and rips her dress straight down the side. The yard freezes, the women scream, the Americans shout, and what happens next will flip the entire story of fear, hate, and truth on its head. Stay with us. You do not want to miss what really happened in that moment. And before we continue, please subscribe, like the video, and support this channel so we can bring you more powerful true stories from World War II. The last days of April 1945 felt thin and brittle, like the world was holding its breath. German forces were collapsing, towns were falling hour by hour, and rumors raced faster than soldiers. In the countryside near Leipzig, a small group of German women stepped out from behind a ruined barn with their hands raised. They were auxiliaries, clerks, and nurses' aides, not frontline fighters, but they carried the same fear as any defeated soldier. One of them, a 24-year-old named Elise Weber, kept her eyes fixed on the ground, as if lifting her head might shame her family. For years, she had been told that Americans would punish any woman who surrendered. Posters, radio broadcasts, and speeches repeated the same warnings. Capture means disgrace. Foreign troops have no mercy. A former Hitler youth instructor had once told her class, better to die than fall into enemy hands. These messages were drilled into young women as tightly as into young men. Even when supplies ran dry and German command structures crumbled, the fear stayed. Now, Elise and the other women walked slowly toward an American checkpoint. The air smelled of mud, engine oil, and burned hay. A jeep idled beside the road, rattling like loose metal in a bucket. Several soldiers watched them with uncertain eyes. None raised a rifle, but none smiled either. Elise's hands shook so badly that the small wooden medical case she carried tapped against her knee with each step. The American officer in charge, a lieutenant barely in his mid-20s, spoke in a calm voice. The women could not understand the words, but the tones surprised them. No shouting, no insults. He pointed toward a patch of gravel and motioned for them to wait there. A sergeant wrote numbers on a clipboard. According to U.S. Army records from that week, more than 30,000 German POWs were processed in the region. Men and women, soldiers and civilians, all moving through hastily built collection points like this one. But numbers did nothing to loosen the knot inside Elise's chest. She expected hunger, punishment, and rough handling. Instead, a soldier passed out tin cups of water. Another brought blankets taken from a supply truck. When one of the older women collapsed from exhaustion, 2 Americans rushed forward to help. The others recoiled instinctively, thinking this was the beginning of abuse, but the soldiers simply lifted the woman under her arms and set her gently against a tree trunk. Elise felt even more confused. Fear had shaped her life so completely that kindness looked dangerous. She remembered her neighbor in Munich whispering, "Americans will starve you first, then they will decide what to do with you." Yet the camp kitchen nearby was boiling potatoes in a big metal pot, steam drifting into the air like warm white clouds. She smelled pepper and broth, real food, not the dry crusts rationed in the collapsing German cities. Still, she refused it. She held the small wooden medical box tightly, the way a drowning person grips driftwood. It had been handed to her during the retreat from the east. "Protect this," an officer had said. She did not know what was inside. She did not question the order. Many women around her felt the same way. Obedience had become a survival skill, but the box was growing warmer against her palm. A faint chemical smell leaked through the cracks, sharp like metal and vinegar. A private standing nearby noticed Elise's trembling hands. He asked softly, "Mum, you okay?" She stepped back quickly, nearly losing her balance. He raised both palms to show he meant no harm. His expression was puzzled. This was not the reaction he expected. Later, he would write in a brief note to his unit clerk, "They looked more scared of us than we were of them." His words mirrored the growing paradox of the war's final days. Enemies who had been taught to hate were now standing face to face with people who looked confused rather than cruel. As the sun dipped lower, the women were moved to a wooden holding shed. Elise felt the box throb with heat against her ribs. She did not understand the danger yet. She only understood fear. Old fear, learned fear, fear inherited from years of speeches and slogans. And as night settled over the camp, she sensed that this fear would soon collide with a truth she had never imagined. The tension in the air was only the beginning. Something inside that wooden box was already pushing this story toward its turning point. Morning arrived with a soft grey light spreading across the holding yard. Dew clung to the fence wires, and the ground smelled of wet ashes from the burned fields nearby. Elise sat with her back against a wooden post, knees pulled close, the medical box resting beside her like a coiled threat. She had slept little. Every snap of a branch, every bootstep, every engine cough made her flinch. Old warnings echoed in her mind. Americans will treat you like animals. But nothing she saw matched those words. Across the yard, a group of American soldiers moved with quiet routine. They checked lists, sharpened pencils, carried crates, and spoke in low voices that sounded more like office chatter than the talk of conquerors. A sergeant opened a metal container filled with food rations. Inside were real items Elise had not seen in months. Corned beef, canned fruit, chocolate bars, and bread that did not crumble into dust. U.S. supply reports from spring 1945 show that American forces were receiving nearly 4,000 calories per soldier per day, a level of abundance impossible in Germany at the time. That difference alone explained why the Americans looked strong and rested while the German prisoners looked thin and brittle. A cook set up a field stove and began ladling soup into tin cups. The steam drifted toward the women, carrying the warm smell of carrots and salt. One of the German clerks whispered, "This is a trick." Another answered, "They want us to trust them. Then they will strike." These fears were not stubbornness. They were the product of years of propaganda. Even as hunger twisted inside them, many women refused the food. Elise kept her head down, but she watched the movements carefully. When a soldier approached with a blanket for one woman shivering in the morning chill, Elise waited for a sudden change, a grab, a shove, something violent. Instead, the soldier placed the blanket gently on the ground and stepped away so the woman could pick it up without fear. This gesture confused her more than anything else. Nearby, a private with a calm face began handing out small paper tags for identification. When he reached Elise, he knelt so he would not tower over her. "Ma'am, name?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered softly, "Elise Weber." Her voice cracked from dryness. He wrote it down carefully, repeating it to make sure he had spelled it right. Then he offered her a cup of water. She refused, hugging her arms around her ribs. He did not insist. He simply placed the cup beside her and walked away. The water reflected the faint sunlight like a tiny mirror. Later, a medic passed through the yard checking for injuries. He carried bandages and small bottles of disinfectant. The sharp smell of alcohol filled the air as he cleaned a cut on one prisoner's hand. Elise watched every movement. The medic spoke gently, tapping the woman's arm before each step so she would understand his intentions. His behavior challenged everything she believed. She had been warned that captured women would face cruelty, but the medic looked more worried than threatening. One of the older women muttered, "If this is kindness, then it is dangerous. It will make us weak." Elise understood that fear. Kindness forced her to question what she had believed for years. She felt like she was standing on thin ice. One step forward meant breaking through everything she had been taught. Yet the evidence around her kept growing. The Americans behaved with discipline, not anger. They treated the women as people, not trophies of war. By midday, the camp moved into a quiet rhythm. Soldiers wrote reports, prisoners sat in rows, and the smell of boiled potatoes hung in the air. Elise's stomach tightened at the scent, but she did not reach for the food. The medical box was still warm against her side, and the faint chemical smell worried her. She wondered if something inside had broken during the retreat. As she shifted her weight, the box brushed her damaged dress, leaving a darker stain on the fabric. She looked down, uneasy. The warmth felt stronger now, as if the wood itself was sweating. She pressed her hand lightly against it, then pulled away quickly. The lid felt hotter than before. The kindness around her no longer felt like the main puzzle. The real question was the box, and as the afternoon shadows stretched across the yard, Elise sensed that whatever was inside would soon pull her story toward a moment that no one expected. The day's gentleness was only the calm before the turn. The evening sky over the holding yard turned a dull orange, the color of dust caught in fading light. Elise sat near the fence, the medical box on her lap. She tried to steady her breathing, but the heat from the box made her uneasy. The wood felt warmer than earlier, almost pulsing. A thin chemical smell drifted from the cracks, sharp, metallic, and strangely sour. It reminded her of hospital rooms she once worked in, where disinfectant stung the nose and left a bitter taste on the tongue. The box had been handed to her during the retreat, when German units were breaking apart under pressure. A wounded officer had pressed it into her hands and said, "Protect this. Do not let it fall into enemy hands." She never questioned him. In those chaotic days, orders felt like anchors. But now, sitting in the quiet camp, she wondered what she had been carrying all this time. Nearby, American soldiers moved through the yard, counting prisoners and checking supplies. Their voices rose and fell like calm waves. One private walked past Elise and slowed for a moment. He sniffed the air, then frowned slightly, noticing the sharp scent. "Smells like solvent," he murmured to the sergeant beside him. They scanned the area but did not find the source. Inside the box, a glass vial of sterilizing fluid had cracked during their retreat, most likely when an artillery shell exploded close enough to shake the ground. Wartime medical kits often carried strong chemical agents used to clean instruments quickly. According to U.S. Army medical reports from 1945, even a small bottle of concentrated sterilant could cause serious skin burns within minutes if it leaked. Elise had no idea. She only knew the heat on her ribs was getting worse. She shifted slightly, and a soft hiss escaped from the box. Her heart jumped. The smell grew stronger, stinging her eyes. She set the box down on the ground, but the warmth still clung to her dress. The fabric on her right side had darkened, sticking to her skin as if glued there. She pressed her fingers lightly against it and winced at the sudden pain. Something was burning through the cloth. Fear gripped her, not fear of the Americans this time, fear of something she carried herself. Across the yard, a corporal noticed her uncomfortable movement. He nudged the soldier beside him and nodded in Elise's direction. The two men watched quietly as she tried to brush her dress away from her side. The corporal whispered, "She's hurt." The private shook his head. "No, something else is wrong." The smell reached them a moment later, faint but unmistakable. Anyone trained in first aid recognized it. Elise tried to stand, but the pain pulled her back down. She pressed her palm against her ribs, and her fingers came away with a slight shine. The chemical was seeping through the cloth. Panic rose inside her. She imagined it was poison, something the Americans might blame her for. She imagined punishment. She imagined shame. The truth was simpler. The chemical was eating through the thin cotton of her dress, slowly reaching her skin. A medic walking nearby caught the scent and turned sharply. His expression changed instantly, from boredom to alarm. He had treated chemical burns before. He knew the signs, the strange discoloration, the sharp smell, the slowed movements caused by pain. He walked quickly toward Elise, raising a hand to catch the attention of a passing soldier. Elise saw him coming and froze. Her breath grew shallow. She clutched the dress instinctively, as if hiding the stain would protect her. The medic spoke gently. "Ma'am, don't touch that." She did not understand the words, but she understood the urgency in his voice. He took one step closer. She backed away, fear flooding her again. Her legs shook, and the box toppled over, landing on the gravel with a dull crack. A thin line of chemical traced the ground like a glowing thread under the orange light. The medic's face tightened. "We need to move now," he said sharply to the soldier beside him. The danger Elise carried had finally revealed itself, and the seconds ahead would force a decision that neither she nor the soldiers could have imagined. The moment of collision between fear and truth was approaching fast. The warning came too late. When the wooden box hit the gravel and cracked open, a fresh wave of chemical smell rose into the air. Sharp, burning, almost metallic. Several soldiers turned at once. A few stepped backward, unsure of what had spilled. The medic, however, knew immediately. His voice tightened as he shouted, "Get her away from it." The urgency cut through the calm of the yard like a blade. Elise did not understand the words, only the sudden fear in the men's eyes. She looked down and saw the liquid spreading in a thin, dark trail. Her dress was already sticking to her skin, and every breath made the burn sharper. She tried to push herself away, but pain shot up her side. Her fingers trembled as she grabbed the hem of her dress, thinking she could pull the cloth free. It didn't move. The chemical had glued the fabric tightly to her skin. A young American soldier, Private Leonard Carter, ran toward her. He had been quiet all morning, a man who looked more like a school teacher than a fighter. His boots kicked up dust as he reached Elise. She flinched at his sudden closeness, raising her arms as if to protect herself. He saw the fear, but he also saw the spreading stain on her dress, a sign he had learned to recognize during basic medical training. He spoke softly at first. "Mom, don't touch it." She backed away, misunderstanding him, her breath fast and shallow. He stepped forward again, palms open, trying to show he meant no harm. But the urgency was growing. The chemical was already burning through the cotton and touching her skin. A thin hiss rose from the spill on the gravel. The medic's voice cut through the noise. "Carter, you have seconds. I'll get the cloth off her." Carter didn't hesitate after that. Training overpowered fear. He reached forward quickly, grabbing the fabric near Elise's ribs. She screamed and twisted away, convinced he was attacking her. For her, the moment felt like every nightmare she had been warned about. For him, it was a race against damage. He pulled hard. The sound ripped through the air, a raw, tearing crack that startled every soldier in earshot. The dress split along the seam, the fabric peeling away from the burn. Elise cried out, falling onto her knees. Several German women gasped. A rifle clattered to the ground as a nervous guard stepped back, unsure what he was seeing. Carter crouched immediately, avoiding her skin. "It's burning you," he said, voice low but shaking. "I'm not hurting you, it's the chemical." Elise could not understand the words, but she saw the shock in his eyes, not cruelty. He tore away the last strip of cloth stuck to her side, revealing the red, blistering patch beneath. The medic rushed in behind him with a canteen. He poured water over the wound in steady streams. The liquid sizzled as it hit the soaked fabric on the ground. A moment of silence followed, heavy, confused, unreal. One German woman whispered, "He saved her." Another said, "No, he attacked her." Both explanations floated in the air, clashing like two languages with no bridge between them. Then the smell changed. The burning scent faded under the scent of cool water. Elise touched her ribs carefully and felt the pain settle into a dull throb. She looked up at Carter with wide, trembling eyes. He stepped back, breathing hard, hands shaking from adrenaline. He removed his jacket, a simple olive-drab uniform coat, and placed it gently over her shoulders, careful not to touch the injured skin. "Just for dignity," he murmured, mostly to himself. A nearby corporal lowered his rifle slowly. The tension in the yard eased by degrees, but no one forgot the ripping sound. It hung in their minds like an echo. A single misunderstanding had almost turned into disaster, but instead it had revealed something unexpected, the human instinct to protect. The medic guided Elise toward the field tent. Carter stayed where he was, watching her leave, dust settling around his boots. He knew she had been terrified of him moments earlier. He also knew that fear had come from stories, not from truth. Around them, the yard returned to its slow rhythm. But something had shifted. Both sides had seen a moment that challenged everything they believed, and this moment was about to follow Elise into the medical tent, where the full truth and its consequences would unfold. The medical tent was warmer than the yard outside, filled with the soft hum of lanterns and the steady rustle of canvas. Elise sat on a low cot, Carter's jacket wrapped around her like a shield. Her breathing was slow but uneven, each inhale a reminder of the burn across her ribs. The medic, Sergeant Hill, worked calmly beside her. He had treated more than 100 chemical burns since the start of the war, but this one carried a different weight. A wound born from fear, mistrust, and a desperate attempt to protect herself. Hill cleaned the burn with gentle hand. The water was cool, and Elise winced only slightly. He used a small metal tool to cut away the last threads of cloth stuck to her skin. "You're lucky," he said softly, not sure if she understood. Another few seconds and this would have gone deep. His notes later recorded the injury as chemical irritation, moderate, caused by field sterilant. In American supply lists, more than 12,000 small boxes of that same chemical had been shipped to frontline units in 1944 alone, most of them meant for disinfecting tools or treating wounds, not hiding in belongings. Elise watched his movements carefully. She did not understand the language, but she recognized the intention. A German interpreter, a former factory worker who had been living in the US before the war, stepped inside to help. His voice was calm and steady as he translated. Elise asked the same question twice. Why did he tear it? Why did he do that? Her voice trembled each time. The interpreter explained slowly, choosing simple words. It was burning you. He had to act fast. If the cloth stayed on your skin, it would have left permanent marks. Elise lowered her eyes. The memory of the fear was still sharp, but the explanation settled into place. She nodded once, still unsure, but no longer shaking. Carter stood near the entrance of the tent, his posture stiff. He kept replaying the moment in his head, her scream, the tear of fabric, the shocked faces around them. He had not meant to frighten her. He had seen danger and reacted, but he also knew how it must have looked. The interpreter walked over to him and relayed Elise's words. She wants to know if you were angry with her. Carter shook his head immediately. No, not for a second. His voice cracked, surprising even himself. Tell her I was trying to help. That's all. When the interpreter repeated the message, Elise looked up. Her expression softened, and for the first time since her capture, she exhaled with relief. Then tell him. Thank you, she said. The words were quiet, but clear. They crossed the tent like a small bridge. Hill wrapped her side with clean gauze, tying it gently. The bandage smelled faintly of vinegar and medical linen. Outside, the yard was alive again with boots on gravel and distant engines. Prisoners were being processed, counted, and assigned. But inside the tent, time slowed. It was just a wounded woman, a medic, an interpreter, and a young soldier trying to understand what the war had turned them into. Before leaving, Carter stepped closer, stopping a full arm's length away to avoid frightening her. He nodded once, a simple gesture of respect. Elise returned the nod, fingers tightening around the jacket he had given her. She would later write in her short post-war testimony that the jacket felt strange, like safety from someone I had feared. Her account became one of several statements collected in 1946, many of them describing small moments of humanity that contradicted wartime rumors. American officials noted that over 380,000 German POWs in US custody had been fed full rations, given medical care, and housed under strict oversight, a system designed to limit cruelty. Lies and safety shaped by rules became one of the war's quiet paradoxes. Elise stood beside the fence, watching the yard. She pressed a hand to her bandaged ribs. The burn still hurt, but it no longer frightened her. Her thoughts drifted back to the moment the dress tore. The sound had felt like an attack. Now she understood. It had been a rescue. The interpreter approached her again and asked if she wanted to write a short statement for the medical records. She hesitated, but agreed. Her words were simple. I thought the soldier meant harm. Instead, he saved me. She stopped there, unsure how to explain the rest. The fear, the shame, the relief. Carter watched from a distance. He did not want to interrupt her, but he hoped she felt safe. His sergeant told him quietly, "Moments like this matter. People remember them." It was true. War was made of numbers, tons of supplies, miles of front lines, lists of casualties, but it was also made of tiny moments that changed how people understood each other. As evening came, the yard grew quieter. A truck rumbled by carrying crates of food, canned beef, bread loaves, powdered milk. The sight reminded Elise of another paradox. Her country had told her Americans were starving Europe to death, yet she now saw food being handed out with measured care. For the first time, she wondered what else she had been taught that was untrue. She looked again at Carter. He gave a small, respectful nod, the same one he had offered in the tent. This time, she returned it without hesitation. This single exchange, small and quiet, carried a larger lesson. It showed that war did not erase humanity. It showed that people who arrived as enemies could discover unexpected fairness, even unexpected kindness. It showed that perception could be broken and rebuilt in the space of a few seconds, the time it took for a dress to tear. As weeks passed, many women in that camp would carry similar memories home. Some would tell their families, some would keep their stories private. But all of them had seen something that challenged the world they had known. They had entered the camp as frightened believers in propaganda, but they left as witnesses to a different truth. They had come as conquerors in their minds, taught to and maintain order. But statistics alone could not explain stories like this one. The tent flap opened, letting in a breath of cold air. Elise stood slowly, leaning on the cot for support. Hill guided her outside, her steps careful but steady. Carter watched her return to the yard, now shielded from the wind by his jacket. She did not fear him anymore. Something had changed, and that change, small as it seemed, was the real beginning of the truth no one expected. When Elise stepped back into the yard, the afternoon light had softened. The gravel no longer looked like a battlefield, but like a temporary crossing point between two worlds. Carter stood a short distance away, speaking quietly with his sergeant. Nearby, the other German women watched Elise closely. Some seemed relieved, others were still unsure, but they all sensed that something important had happened, something that did not fit the stories they had been told. For months, German propaganda had warned women that American soldiers were brutal, lawless, and hungry for revenge. Posters showed dark silhouettes and frightening slogans. Teachers repeated the same message. Radios carried it day and night. Many women believed it. Elise herself had feared the worst when she surrendered. But now, wrapped in an American soldier's jacket, she felt a truth forming that did not match the warnings. Across Europe, the war had created countless moments like this, small clashes between fear and reality. Records from 1945 show that more than 5 million German soldiers surrendered in the final months, along with tens of thousands of civilians who were displaced or trapped between collapsing front lines. Many carried old ideas about their enemies, only to face a very different experience once captured. American camps were not perfect, but they followed strict rules. Rations weighed out per person, medical tents staffed daily, and work details monitored. Reports noted how each camp received thousands of blankets, gallons of water per prisoner per day, and crates of medical supplies, even when America's own units were stretched thin. This contrast, fear shaped by see themselves as superior, victorious, chosen, they left as students of a new reality. In the end, America's greatest weapon was not power or fire. It was the simple strength of discipline, order, and unexpected humanity, something far harder to defeat than any army. The story of the torn dress spread quietly through the camp, passed from woman to woman in hushed voices. Not because it was dramatic, but because it revealed something larger. Fear could be built from lies, but truth came through action. Elise would remember the burning pain, the shock of the rip, and the surprising gentleness that followed. Carter would remember her frightened eyes turning calm. And long after the war ended, both sides would carry small stories like this, reminders that even in the darkest years, humanity had not disappeared. In a world shattered by conflict, these small moments became proofs of dignity and restraint.